We're in the Maimer Basi Legani, Tafshin Yud Zayin, on page Tes Vav. We're holding chapter 3. Let's just get up to date before we continue. On Tuesday we discussed the idea of tzimtzum. We mentioned that there are two types of tzimtzum. Tzimtzum means contraction. There are two types of tzimtzum. In the process of creation, when God created the world, one of the critical stages was tzimtzum, contraction. And there was the first tzimtzum, the tzimtzum harishain, that first tzimtzum, the first contraction, in order to create, was a tzimtzum b'derech siluk, meaning removal. God had to create an empty space in which to create a world, because before tzimtzum, there's no space for any independent existence or anything that appears to be an independent existence. So the first step was a tzimtzum, was a contraction. But there again, the first one was siluk, was removal, to empty a space, to clear a space out, and there to create his world. Now we're going to learn later the meaning. This mimer doesn't really address tzimtzum shaloi kipshutai, right? The big topic that's discussed in Chassidus at length, the different opinions on this first tzimtzum that was a removal or an emptying out of a space, that it's not literal. We address it sort of in a backhanded way, but this is not the topic of this class, but that's not for right now. Then afterwards, all subsequent tzimtzumim, all subsequent contractions were miyut, was a minimization of light. So after he creates an empty space, he shines a light back into that space. God, as creative energy and force, now re-enters that space. And as we get closer to our unholy, ungodly world, our tachtoinim, the ikashchina b'tachtoinim haisa, as we get closer to this world, the light of God, the divine energy that animates all of creation, becomes dimmer and dimmer. So that's a tzimtzum, that's not a contraction in terms of removing from an absence coming out of the space, but a minimization, minimizing the light and further minimizing it through many tzimtzumim and contractions until we get to our world where we don't see any light. So now, so in chapter 2, the Rebbe brings from the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, he discusses the pasuk Vayemer Hashem, Vayemer Elikim Yihi Oir Vayihi Oir. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And what emerges, the Rebbe makes 3 points, quoting first from the Baal Shem Tov, and then quoting 2 teachings of the Magid of Mizrich, the Baal Shem Tov's successor. And what emerges is that in order for there to be existence, there had to be a contraction. There had to be a tzimtzum. God had to vacate a space. And then what emerges, though, afterwards, what re-enters that space in terms of the divine energy that creates is not something new, but it's something that originates from before, something from before that's there. Just like the Magid, towards the end of chapter 2, mentions this idea of tzimtzum is like chachma. Chachma is wisdom, the highest stage of intellect. And the highest stage of intellect, even though intelligence means something that's legible, that's understandable, something that you can explain, comprehensible, but in its first stage, wisdom is actually incomprehensible. It's a mystery, it's a curiosity, it's something that lies beyond really understanding. That's the first stage of understanding. So in chachma, in that first stage of intellect, you already have the fully developed and understood and comprehensible idea. It's just that it's in an abstract form. Or to put it back in the terms of the mimer, it's like the yud, it's like a dot, an undefined, abstract point. So in that mystery, in that concealment, you already have everything that's going to follow. Okay. Now, chapter 3, the Rebbe is going to further explain this idea about the fact that this idea that the original energy, or the energy that precedes tzimtzum, is actually found post tzimtzum as well. And he's going to start by explaining the second part. Remember we mentioned that this mimer, this discourse, is built on a discourse of the previous Rebbe, Basi Legani, and specifically on chapter 7. And in chapter 7, I remind you, the previous Rebbe says that the Yud is the beginning of all letters, and with Yud, the world to come was created. That's what he says. And the Rebbe is explaining that here. What does it mean that the Yud is the beginning of all letters? So that Yud is the beginning of creation. As we explained at the beginning of chapter 2, that the first stage to creation has to be Yud, has to be minimization, has to be tzimtzum. Not just the tzimtzum that the receiver has to be submissive, but also the teacher. Exactly. The teacher as well has to minimize himself. And this idea we're going to explain a little bit more. We'll elaborate on that idea moving forward. There has to be that. So we see how the Yud is the Reish L'chol Ha'osis. It's the beginning of all letters. Anything that's any revelation that's going to come, any creation has to start with a Yud, has to start with a minimization, has to start with a concealment. And then the Friedrich Rebbe says in his Maimer, that's that B'Yud Nivra Ha'olam Haba. What's the connection? What is this? It seems just like another random statement. What's the connection? So we're going to explain that now and see how each statement that the Yud is the beginning, that all creation begins with the Yud, begins with the concealment, begins with the tzimtzum, and the fact that with Yud, the world to come was created, we'll see how they complement each other, how they explain each other. So now chapter 3. To explain this matter, and also to understand why he says in the Maimer that B'Yud Nivra Olam Haba, that with the Yud, the world to come was created. So when we say Olam Haba, what do we mean by Olam Haba? Olam Haba means the world to come. What is the world to come? What are we referring to? So generally, I think generally when we say Olam Haba, the world to come, we're referring to Gan Eden. After a person passes away, where do they go? They go to Olam Haba. They go to the world to come, which is the world that follows the life. It's the life that's lived in the world that follows the life lived in this world. But here, certainly, when the Maimer, the world to come means the time of Mashiach. The world to come means the redeemed world, the world post-redemption. That's what we mean. And that's what he says here. Hine Yadua, it's known, She'elam Haba b'chlolusai, Elam Haba, the world to come, generally, in Yanei Kabbalah, Schar al HaTorah va'Avodah, it is generally a reward for the Torah that was studied, and the work, the divine service, b'meshach shis alfei shnin, during the 6 millenniums, the 6,000 years, the Hava Alma, that the world is in existence, Shenikra b'shem Olam Haza, which is called this world. So you have the 6 millennium of creation. This 6,000 years is Olam Haza, is this world, and the world to come is the 7th millennium, is the era of redemption. And the 7th millennium comes as a reward for what happened in the first 6,000 years, which is all the Torah and Avodah, all the Torah mitzvahs that we did during these 6,000 years. Right? So this world is Olam Haza, and then V'achakach ba Olam Haba, Shenasa Yidei Teirasim Avidasim. Then comes Olam Haba, which is created, which is made possible by our Torah and service. O B'shvil Schar Zeda Olam Haba, and for this reward of Olam Haba, of the world to come, Yorda HaNeshama Yerida G'dela, the soul descended, a great descent. Me'igra Rama, from the highest peak, Lebira Miktav, to the deepest abyss. It came from way up high as fathomable, to the lowest possible depth. So that obviously is a painful thing, a concept, to take a neshama, to tear it out of heaven, from where it's close to God, and thrust it down here into this world. Such a low world, so far away from where it began. But the reward, the payoff for it, makes it all worth it. The payoff for being thrown into this lowly world, which is Olam Haba, the world to come, is worth this whole painful descent. Why? Because before the neshama comes down to this world, the neshama is on a very high level. Before the neshama comes into this world and into this life, it is connected to godliness. It's a divine creature. As the pasuk says, Chai Havaya Asher Amadati Lefanav. Elisha says, he sort of says, it invokes God's name, the living God, Asher Amadati Lefanav, who I stand before. Ein Amida Ela Tefillah, right? Like the Gemara says, that Amida, I stood before, meaning in prayer, meaning that there's a connection. I'm connected to Hashem. And we're saying here in the past tense, in the Maimer, we're using this verse to explain that Chai Havaya Sharmati Lefanav, the God before whom I stood, before the neshama comes down to this world, I was already standing before him. I was already connected, right? Connected to Hashem. Vimkein. If so, Hayirida Lamata Labira Amikta, Hayirida Gdei Labiyaser. If the neshama stood before God, was connected to God before it came down to this world, so then coming down to this world, where suddenly it's not standing before God. It doesn't feel like it's standing before God. So that's a harsh descent. That's a harsh tumble. This descent is for the purpose of an ascent. This is a famous statement. Yerida tzarech aliyah. Brought Latmach said this, that every descent is for the purpose of ascent. And the example would be like a lever that you have to pull down to push up. Or if you want to jump, so the higher you want to jump, the lower you have to crouch beforehand. The lower you crouch, the higher you can jump. I don't know, is that how that? Or you take 3 steps back to jump 4 steps forward. So this descent into this world is only to reach a higher level than before. It's not that the neshama comes down to this world and the purpose is to go back to where it came from. Why go through all that pain? Come down to here just to get back to where it started. So obviously it's the purpose of the descent is for an aliyah, for an ascent that would follow to reach even a higher level. Well, what could be higher? What could be higher than being amadati lefanov chayavaya asher amadati lefanov, standing before God? It's that through coming down here, it reaches higher than it was before. And in what sense? What does this mean that it reaches higher? So, this idea of the ascent that follows the descent into this world is Kamesha Kosov, like the pasuk says, "Achas sha'alti meis havaya." I ask only one thing of God, which is lachzois benoyam havaya. To see, to perceive the pleasantness of God. The noyam havaya. What does this mean, the pleasantness of God? This noyam havaya, this pleasantness of God, hu noyam shenimshach mishem havaya. It's as the Zohar says, it's the pleasantness that emerges from the name havaya. And what is the pleasantness of the name? Noyam havaya. In other words, there's havaya, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, God's name, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. And then the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei has a noyam. There's a pleasure of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. What's the pleasure within havaya? What's the pleasure of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei? That's the first letter of the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, which is Yud. So the pleasure of havaya is in the Yud. The primary letter in the name and the primary source of the pleasure is the Yud. This is the meaning that the Yud, Nivra Elam Haba, the world to come is created with the Yud. And in order to attain this level, to be able to see the pleasantness of havaya, the whole descent into this world is worth it. So before the world is created, it's amadati havaya asher amadati lefanav, you stand before havaya. Once the neshama comes down, what happens? Then it's not lachza, it's benoyam havaya. It's not just standing before havaya, but it now, excuse me, it now can perceive, can connect with the pleasantness of havaya. What is the pleasantness of havaya, which is expressed in the yud of havaya? What is that? So that's, the Rebbe continues. Page Tezayin. What's noyam? The pleasantness. Noyam, pleasantness is pleasure. It's tainug, pleasure. Like the pasuk says, "Vihi noyam." May there be, may the pleasantness of Hashem when the Mishkan was completed. So Moshe says, "Vihi noyam Hashem Elokeinu aleinu." May the pleasantness of Hashem descend into this edifice, into this structure, into this world. And what's that pleasantness? That's the pleasure that Hashem wants us to build him a Mishkan. We build it, and that brings that pleasure, and we want that pleasure to be apparent here. So we see that Noyam means, the pleasantness means pleasure. The Yuvan, and we can understand what's the significance of this pleasure. So we can know it when we think about pleasure as it relates to us in our own reality. That pleasure is cholok v'naila mishar kochas hanefesh. Pleasure, our capacity for pleasure, is removed, is far beyond and above all the other faculties of our souls. Even higher than the revelation of the soul that's manifest when a person is happy. That's manifest in joy, which, as we know, joy is very, very powerful because joy breaks all boundaries. And it totally obliterates any obstacles and challenges. So when we talk about our faculties of our soul, the powers of our soul, you have a capacity to feel, and within feeling you have all different types of emotion, a capacity for kindness, for empathy, for judgment. Then we have a capacity for intellect, to think. Right? So our intellect is higher than our emotions. What's higher than even the intellect? Here you have joy, a greater feeling, a more powerful experience, a human experience beyond even thinking, and that consciousness is the power for joy, which is why joy can break through anything. When you're happy, you can overcome anything with joy. Pleasure is even higher than joy. I don't think we should get too carried away in the details of the different levels that they relate to within the soul. So unless we want to discuss that here today, let's avoid that. But the point is, let's just stick with what we're saying here, which is that pleasure is the highest capacity of the soul. Why is that? How do we see that pleasure is greater than joy? Joy seems to be very great. Your essence is sort of revealed when you're happy. When you're happy, you're less inhibited. You can do anything you want. You're outgoing. All your faculties are on point, are powerful, are going full blast. So how is it that pleasure is greater? So let's see what he says. Kipa'ulas hasimcha. The effect of joy is that the soul and all its faculties are in a manner of ispashtus, of expansion. To the extent that they affect and impact even the physical body. In other words, joy is an emotion, it's a feeling, it's a spiritual thing. But the joy impacts you and even in a physical way. It's felt even in your feet. When you're happy, you feel it even in your feet. How do we see that you feel it even in your feet? When you're happy, you dance. So why are you dancing? You're overcome with such a feeling of joy that your feet can't stand, they can't sit still, they need to move. Your body is shaking and moving. So we see the great power of joy. And what's joy? Joy is a hispashtus nefesh. It's an expansion of the soul, where the soul is revealed. Your character, your personality, your essence is revealed, and it's revealed even in a physical sense. So even though joy is really a revelation to an extent of the soul, but it's not a revelation of the essence of the soul. Why? It's just that the each limb and each faculty of the body reaches its maximum volume and potential through joy. But what's happening? It's all of your powers, all of your faculties on full blast. So what's moving when you're dancing? What's moving? Your body's moving. But is it expressing the essence of the soul? It's not expressing the essence of the soul.
Sometimes you dance when you're not happy.
Yeah, sometimes you can dance when you're not happy. That's true. Well, then maybe it would be. So let's finish the start here. We'll try and explain it. However, tainug by contrast, pleasure by contrast to joy. It's true that pleasure causes sort of an expansion, like the pasuk says, that a good hearing good news expands the bone. Right? You know the story with was it Vespasian, the Roman general who was notified that he became emperor, and he was then laying siege to Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yochanan and suddenly he got word that the emperor was assassinated, I think, or he died, and he's the new emperor.
They dressed him as emperor. Oh, right. Yeah, and he got the news. Exactly.
And then he couldn't take off his shoe. So Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said to him, "Have an enemy come." Have somebody you despise walk before you, and then you'll be able to remove your shoe. Why was it? What was the problem? So he explained, because when you hear something good, you expand. And here it was even physically his foot, from the pleasure of being emperor, expanded, it swelled, and he couldn't remove his shoe. So when he saw something negative, that mitigated and reduced a little bit of that joy, and he was able to remove his shoe. Okay. But we see that pleasure also affects the body in that physical sense. Nevertheless, it's not the same as with joy. It's not an outward external expansion. As we see in reality, in real life, when a person finds pleasure and delight in any delightful thing, when a person is experiencing pleasure from any given thing that gives him pleasure, he's not jumping around and hyper as he would be when he's excited, when he's happy. You take it, it's a bit easy, right? You take it easily, you take it in a relaxed way. Because of the pleasure, he's actually calm. He's subdued.
You think some people are like that?
No, every person's like this. When you're happy, when you're experiencing joy, the energy is just bursting. You feel like you're exploding. You can't stop moving. But when you're experiencing pleasure, you're tranquil, you're relaxed, you're subdued. If so, it's this idea of pleasure, and even though it expands, the body expands, there's that expansion, but it's not the same as when it's with joy, where all the faculties and capacities of the soul are on full blast. What you're doing is you're revealing the essence of all of these powers, which is why the powers aren't on full blast, but they're calmer. And this idea is expressed in the faculties and the powers of the soul as they are. We'll put it in very simple terms to use a sports analogy. When somebody starts celebrating, what's the problem? Yeah? Somebody hits a home run and starts celebrating. They run around the bases and they're jumping and dancing and gyrating. And what do you tell them? What do people tell them? Act like you've been there before, right? It's not professional. Yes, we all enjoy celebration and excitement and the theatrics, but you tell somebody, or even if you didn't give them that advice, eventually somebody hit the difference between hitting your first home run and your 100th home run is not your 100th, because that's maybe a significant milestone, but your 102nd home run. It's not breaking any records. It's just another home run. When you've already hit 100 of them, you're not running around the bases with the same excitement. Why? And what does it mean when you say act like you've been there before? See, when it's something new for you, it's a new experience, so there's joy. I'm doing something that I've never done before. It's very exciting, and you're very happy. And so therefore it's expressed in an overly outward emotional manner. But once you've already established yourself as a home run hitter, something that this is what you do, so now there's pleasure. Of course, there's pleasure in every home run you hit. You have pleasure, but it's not joy. Why? Because this is who I am. I hit home runs. This is what I do. In other words, the fact that joy is expressed in movement and excitement and outward theatrics means that even though it's coming from a deeper part of the soul, but its effect on the body is something else. It's not the essence of the foot, of the capacity to move, which is why the foot is just jumping and dancing. Pleasure, on the other hand, is the essence of the soul. Or it comes from, is an expression of the very essence of the soul. The essence of the soul is the same essence in the mind and in the hand and in the foot. And so therefore, when that's expressed, it's expressed in a calmer way. Because this is what I am. It's not something other than me. It's not a foreign experience that's overwhelming me. It is who I am.
So is it by person or is it by action? Like,
well, that's
people have different sensations from the same action.
Yeah, it depends on, because we're all different, so it's all on that spectrum. Right. The point is that the experience is the same. The reaction your personal reaction is the same. It's just the experience is different. For some people, this is the experience. People get pleasure from different things. Right? So does that make sense? So we see the difference between pleasure and joy. But what's the point we're getting to here? We started by saying that the purpose of the descent down into this world is to reach higher than before. So before, the neshama stands before Havaya. Then, through coming down to this world, what does it get? It gains the ability to access the pleasure of Havaya. What's the point of the pleasure of Havaya? Well, when we talk about pleasure, pleasure means the very essence. So we can reach a higher level, not just as God is known outwardly, but a revelation of His essence. Okay, so what does this have to do with our conversations? The pleasantness of Havaya, meaning the pleasure, that comes from Shem Havaya, which is primarily the Ois Yud, is Biyud Nivra Elam Haba, who Gilei Apnimis Va'atzmis de Lamaila. What is the meaning of Yud Nivra Elam Haba? That the world to come through it we have Elam Haba. Is that in the world to come we have this pleasure is now manifest, is now accessible, and is now revealed. So you have the Yud represents and encapsulates the Noyam Havaya, the pleasure of Havaya. Now we're in Elam Haza. We don't feel it, we don't see it, we don't experience it. But as a result of our efforts in this world, for the 6,000 years of doing Torah and mitzvahs, we merit the Yud Nivra Elam Haba. The world to come is built on that Yud, meaning the world to come is an expression. It becomes a world, a defined and broader world, a developed world, the reality from that Yud. That Yud now is expanded. It now becomes accessible, right? So what does the Yud Nivra Elam Haba mean again? That Yud, that abstract point, that's the expression of God's essence, becomes Elam Haba, becomes experienceable. It's something that we can experience. It becomes something that is developed and formed and becomes Elam Haba. In order to access, to gain this pleasantness of Havaya, which is Gilei Apnimis V'atzmis de Lamaila, which, as we said, what does the pleasantness mean? This pleasure means a revelation of the essence of God. So first you have to have the tzimtzum. Which is alluded to, as we mentioned in chapter 2, by the Yud of the name Havaya. Through this we can then have a revelation of the essence of God. The pleasantness, which is revealed in the world to come. So which on that Yud, it says the world to come is built. So again, the Friedrich Rebbe in his Maimer says Yud is the beginning of all letters. Then he says Biyud Nivra Elam Haba. What does one have to do with the other? They seem to be two different things. So the Rebbe explains, Yud being the beginning of all letters means that there has to be a tzimtzum. There has to be that concealment. And what comes as a result of that concealment? And the concealment, as we said in chapter 2, and we're going to discuss at greater length coming up, the concealment doesn't mean that there's a total there's an absence, right? That God removes himself from that space, but embedded in there is God's essence. It's only through that concealment that we have access to God's essence. And so that very Yud, which symbolizes contraction, which symbolizes tzimtzum, concealment, is what then becomes Elam Haba. The tzimtzum itself becomes revealed as the greatest revelation of God. So how do we get to Elam Haba? Through the Yud that's the Reish Chalesius. So we see how the two complement each other. First there's Yud, Reish Chalesius. Yud is the bittul, is the tzimtzum, it's the nullification. God's nullifying himself, making himself smaller, creating that empty space. And as a result of that is Biyud Nivra Elam Haba. That Yud, that tzimtzum becomes Elam Haba, becomes the pleasure, the pleasantness, the essence of God that's revealed in the world to come. So that we're going to get to later. Izdalid, we're going to start getting more into this, where we have to finish developing this idea. Why does it have to come through Tzimtzum? What's the meaning? Why is it through Tzimtzum? So in Izdalid, we're going to get a lot more mystical and Kabbalistic. We're going to talk about why the Tzimtzum is necessary to gain access to that essence. That's coming up. That's what we have to still resolve, and then we'll have a better, fuller picture of this. But that's the end of chapter 3. I think we'll cut it off here because I don't know if we'll have a chance to get